This video is going to be my reaction to the Texans wildcard win over the Cleveland Browns Saturday night. They'll move on to the division round after really rolling over the Browns 45-14. Look, the two pick sixes in the third quarter, some would say they're anomalous situations, but the reality is this Browns offense has been turnover prone for the entire year. Give the Browns credit for getting to the playoffs while they were having trouble with so many injuries, but turnovers have been an issue no matter who the quarterback has been this year. Cleveland's offense committed 17 turnovers in their first 7 games of the year, coming out of training camp. No matter who the quarterback was, they turned the football over. The two pick sixes, one by Steven Nelson, one by Christian Harris, just closed the show on what was already a one-sided night in terms of gameplay. The score may have not represented it at halftime, being only 24-14. This very easily could have been a 31-14 differential at the half. The Houston Texans were better all the way around, and I think their coaches coached in a more fundamental way as well. C.J. Stroud clearly will get a lot of the attention, as well he should. They had shredded Cleveland's defense throughout the game. Stroud finished 16 for 21, 3 touchdowns, 274 yards. Really, he could have had another touchdown and another 50 yards through the air. He overthrew Nico Collins on a 3rd and 13 with about 9 minutes left in the second quarter. Really, his only misstep, I should say. Texans had a 24-14 lead at the half, and if Stroud completes that one, the game was over at that point already. Really, once the Texans got to 30 points, I thought the game was going to be over. I thought the gameplay was 75-25 or 80-20 in their favor, even when the Browns scored 2 touchdowns on back-to-back possessions to hang around. They were generating big plays but had no consistent offensive concepts that were there for them in terms of run concepts or play action built off of those run plays to go to like the Texans did. Everything the Texans did was working. Here's the Texans' first half possessions. Punt on the opening possession. Then they go field goal, which was 7 plays, 43 yards. Third drive, 4 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. Fourth possession, the 76-yard touchdown to Brevin Jordan on the designed play-action boot into the boundary. Then the fifth possession is the third down overthrow that I mentioned, Stroud overthrowing Collins on a 3rd and 13. Then the sixth possession, which I thought was just brilliant by Houston. Again, this is second quarter, and I thought that broke the Browns' defense completely. They not only did the Browns have no answers, but at this point, 6th possession, they knew they didn't have any answers. So I'll go over that possession here. The Texans had a 17-14 lead, and I believe have just gotten a stop in the second quarter. Brilliant play call to open this possession. In our Discord, which is a Ravens Discord, we do have one really dedicated Texans fan in there, HTX Canes, and he keeps it focused on the Texans in the NFL Other Teams channel, which is really cool. And tonight, the Ravens channel became a Texans channel. This first call of this possession, 9-yard sweep to John Mechie or Michi. I misspelled his name and probably mispronounced it as well. I thought it was a brilliant call because it set the stage for the third play of this drive. After Singletary bounced outside, I don't have the gain there, but it was obviously a gain of 6 on the 2nd and 1. The third play is another jet motion by Mechie or Michi. And then Collins from the X receiver position runs the hide concept against the grain of the motion out to the wide side of the field. Ended up being a 12-yard gain. Hutchinson with a delayed play-action pass completed in the left flats. I like that Hutchinson and Michi were being rotated as the guys running the jet motion, so it wasn't the same player every time. The Rams will do that Sunday night. They'll have Nakua and Kupp on the field the whole game, and they'll run the jet or the fast motion the entire game. And by late third quarter, you'll be able to see, if not earlier than that, their motion will be 80%, and there'll be no real threat of the jet actually being handed off, which is why I like the opening play call of this 6th drive. Because when those guys are running that jet motion, they're running at full speed because they actually might get the ball. The 3rd and 5, defensive pass interference, which is the 6th play down for you guys, 3rd and 5 from the 40, is an obvious call. The DB is holding the whole time. I think it's number 33 for the Browns. I think he actually held twice. Singletary then with a big run that gets called back for a hold that I think actually is a hold on the right guard for the Texans. Nonetheless, the inside linebacker for the Browns went to the wrong side. It's absent the hold, you're still going to have the opportunity for a big game, and Singletary almost took it to the house and scored. After a loss on the play to Singletary, the 2nd and 20, I think this illustrates the lack of discipline that the Browns defense showed, at least on this night. I'm not saying that they had that all throughout the course of the season, but it's 2nd and 20, and there's a play action concept. Tight end, 21 personnel, by the way. Tight end, fullback are both on the right, lined up as a tight end and a wing. And the tight end runs a post, 37-yard touchdown. So great throw by Stroud, great call by Bobby Slowick, puts him up 24-14. Really, at that point, I thought the game was over. Absent even the turnovers, the Browns didn't have any run game to speak of at all. No balance to their offense, really. They were surviving on these abnormal plays, to be honest with you. And I thought I'll be honest with you, I pinned some of the blame on that on their head coach. His unwillingness to even attempt regular run concepts, to me, was a factor. Cleveland finished with 56 yards rushing on 20 carries. Now, look, I know injuries played a role. And if there's Browns fans who listen this long or people who want to take up for their head coach, go right ahead. But even before Nick Chubb's injury this year, their play calling in certain situations was extremely questionable from a fundamental standpoint. Their turnovers are not just related to injuries, whether it's injuries to their O-line and or skill position players. Go look at their turnovers for the year, guys. They had at least one turnover in every single football game this year, except for their Week 9 win over the Cardinals. And they had 2 turnovers or more in 14 of the 18 football games they played this year. It's obscene how much they turned the football over this year. And I understand their head coach should get credit for keeping that team focused and getting them to the playoffs, relying on their defense. I get it. But he also deserves blame for their turnovers because it happened under so many different quarterbacks and in so many different situations. But the Texans defense deserves credit. Look, they had 4 sacks today, 2 pick sixes, one by Steven Nelson, and one by Christian Harris, who played a brilliant football game. I think he jumped a 3rd or a 4th down pass from Flacco in the 3rd quarter into the boundary. On the other side of the coin, the Browns defense that has so much of a reputation for pressuring the quarterback, and they certainly did at times in 2023, they did nothing tonight. Myles Garrett was unheard of. Stroud looked comfortable with each read he was given. He was on time. I thought the Texans' defensive pressure to getting to the quarterback standpoint far outweighed what the Browns were able to do on this night. Derek Barnett looks fantastic since the Texans have picked him up. I think he has 3.5 sacks now. Will Anderson had a sack, so did Harris. The Texans' inside linebackers played great generally, except for 3 or 4 pass plays in the opening half. But even then, you could see the gameplay was heavily weighted towards the Texans. It seemed obvious to me that the Browns would be the first team to make a mistake, and sure enough, they were. Houston's defense in the second half goes interception for a touchdown, Nelson, interception for a touchdown, Harris, and then 3 consecutive 4th down stops to finish the game. For all intents and purposes, the game was over at that point after the 2 pick sixes, but nonetheless, Houston goes down offensively and has a drive that bridges the gap between the 3rd and the 4th quarter. It's their 8th possession. Ironically, it's after Cleveland had 3 drives in a row with the 2 pick sixes and then their 3rd drive ending at midfield on a 4th down. Houston takes over at the 50, and a backside slant to Collins just perfectly timed up for 10 yards. Singletary, a couple of runs. Then on a 3rd and 4, I thought this play revealed a lot about what the Texans were able to do and what they were focused on doing throughout this game. It's a 3rd and 4, first play of the 4th quarter. Don't get me wrong, the game's pretty much over at this point. It's 38-14. But this 3rd and 4, Stroud takes 1 step and completes it to Robert Woods, inside leverage against man. The Browns' unwillingness to adjust from a coverage standpoint, I thought was obvious. Especially by this situation early 4th quarter. But I thought early 3rd quarter, it looked like they were unwilling or incapable, I guess I should say, of playing other coverages. Singletary on a power play from the 23-yard line gets 3 or 4 yards, And you could see Cleveland overcommitting to the flow side. So on the very next play, they run the same concept, 22 personnel. Singletary cuts it back from the 19-yard line, 19-yard touchdown, finishes the game off 45-14. To me, it was quite obvious that the Browns just didn't have it defensively tonight. Their inability to adjust, I thought, made things worse, exacerbated the situation, if you will. And I guess maybe you could say their unwillingness to even try to get away from their man-free scheme, because the Texans had all the answers against man-free. In the first, and that was obvious in the first half. Stroud was 11 of 16 in the first half, 236 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like I said, had the overthrow of Collins on their 5th possession that could have made it worse. The sixth drive that I detailed and talked about, I thought it was fun to watch. First of all, it was a thing of beauty. Stroud was going through his reads extremely quick, finding open guys, and I thought the design of a lot of these plays was such that they took advantage of the Browns' tendency to play so much man-free. Finally, on that 6th possession, that post, I think 37-yard touchdown to Schultz on a 2nd and 20 was quite revealing, because the Browns gave up big plays tonight where they missed tackles. They gave up big plays on blown coverages. They gave up big plays where guys just beat them man-to-man. Singletary scored. They got broken. I mean, they really got broken. One sequence that I would like to talk about is the Texans' 3rd possession, the Browns' 4th, and then the Texans' 4th. I think there's 21 points scored in 3 minutes and 11 seconds of gameplay officially. Of course, in real time, probably talking about 10 minutes of real time watching the game. Browns had taken a 7-3 lead on Kareem Hunt's first touchdown. And then the Texans go right downfield, getting the ball from their own 25, negative 25, top of your screen. Singletary for 29. I thought it was actually 30, but I got it listed as 29 yards on a pin pull. So pin down on the outside linebacker or D-end, and then pull with the tackle lead. And then Michie, right sideline for 27 yards. Really cool to see him having an impact. Got to give the Texans credit, man. I mean, Michie, again, however you pronounce his name, Hutchinson. Those guys getting on the field along with Collins in the absence of Tank Dell. Schultz playing a role, obviously. Collins on this reverse, 3rd play of the 3rd possession, got 4. And then the screen to Collins from the 15, who just looks like an absolute load for DBs to try to tackle out in space. He actually cut outside of the blocking scheme, I think, on that little bubble screen, or hitch screen, I should say. So scored from the 15-yard line, put him up 10-7. Browns' 4th possession bridged the end of the first into the second quarter. It did include a 53-yard throw from Flacco, brilliant, in between 2 inside linebackers. I think it was in between the Mike and the Sam. Threw it before the tight end is open, I guess you could say. Some people call it an anticipation throw. It's just a slant that you're throwing into the window because you know it's going to be open. So I don't really call it an anticipation throw. It's a read. You see the open area, but I digress. 53-yard gain for Harrison Bryant to finish the first quarter. Couple of short runs by Ford. They convert on a really cool and unique quarterback sneak on a 3rd and 2 by Flacco from an unbalanced line set. Then he throws back against the grain on a rollout. They did that 4 times in the first half alone. Very obviously, I thought they were trying to get the Texans' fast defense flowing in one direction and then throw back to the other side against the grain there. Shovel pass to Kareem Hunt ends up being his 2nd touchdown from 11 yards out. And the Browns look like they're in great position, 14-10. Certainly at that point doesn't support my assertion that I thought the Texans were outplaying them. From there on out in the second quarter, it was all Texans, including this 76-yard touchdown. Brilliantly designed play, if you ask me. 2 tight ends to the right, and the tight end on the line of scrimmage is Jordan, and he steps out to the defensive end edge defender. The outside tight end steps in like a Jill ISO and leads up, and then it's a delayed release by the inside tight end, Jordan, into the boundary. Catches the ball from C.J. Stroud, races up the right sideline, makes one guy miss, I believe, or makes one move. 76 yards, puts him up 17-14. That 6th possession after a stop makes it 24-14. We all know how the third quarter happened. Look, this is a dangerous Texans team. If you've listened this long, you know that already because you're probably a Texans fan, is my guess, or someone who thinks their team might play the Texans in the division round. Credit to not only their coaching staff for this game, but for the way they handled the season. C.J. Stroud didn't play in the regular season game against the Browns, and they were still able to put up a fight. But getting C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson, two high-level premium players, not talking about premium positions, but premium players at 2 and 3, they weren't willing to settle for just number 2. I love what they did on draft night. In fact, I'll link up my draft reaction video after the first round, and then I did one for the Texans after the second round because Kane's in our Discord. He supports me on Patreon. Is so dedicated to the Texans and is so cool being in our Discord with over 70 Ravens fans at this point, and he's the lone Texans fan representing in there and carrying things in an extremely classy manner, especially after the Ravens beat the Texans in Week 1. It certainly looks like that could be the matchup that's set up in the division round, and I think it's a tough one. I think this Texans team is a difficult matchup for anyone. I know there's already people saying, well, if the Chiefs win, which they are at this point against the Dolphins as I record this, 16-7 right near the half, that the Texans don't have the ability to go win in that type of weather against Kansas City. I disagree. I think this Texans team, if they play turnover-free and their defense is able to stop or slow down the run the way they have all year, if you don't know, they're the second best defense in the NFL against the run from a yards per carry standpoint. Before the wild card game, this game against the Browns, I did a preview video, or I talked in our Discord about how the Texans were only allowing 3.5 yards per carry, the second lowest in the NFL. I didn't get a chance to do a preview video, but that was one of the main points I wanted to make was they're going to stop or slow down your running game, number one. And number two, because the Browns' running game was so inconsistent and porous at times, in fact, in the last 5 weeks, that this was a really dangerous game for them. And lo and behold, that's the way that it turns out. I'm not saying I was right. I think it was quite obvious. You could look at the Browns' output in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks offensively and say if they can't run the football and they've got to throw the ball an inordinate amount of times, meaning 30 plus times in a normal game. Now, in this case, Joe Flacco threw it 46. It doesn't surprise me that in 46 pass attempts, Joe Flacco threw 2 pick sixes. In fact, I would say that if you offered it to me before the game, Flacco throws 46 passes. How many of them do you think are intercepted and or strip sacks by the Texans defense, their pass rush? I would say 3 plus. I just think that's the way that the Browns offense has been, and I don't blame Flacco for that. Again, referencing what I said earlier in this video. Here's the Browns turnovers by game in reverse. 2 against the Bengals in their loss to cap the regular season. 3 in their win against the Jets December 28th, Week 17. 2 against the Texans in that 36-22 win down in Houston in the regular season. 3 against the Bears. 3 against the Jags. Only 1 against the Rams in a blowout loss. 3 against the Broncos. 1 against the Steelers. 2 against the Ravens. They turned the football over because the offensive system is flawed. It was like that before Nick Chubb even went out. Feel free, if you're a Browns fan, to react to that or at least determine that I'm not a rational person to listen to. Let's do this in the other way. Here's the Browns turnover starting in the beginning of the season. 2 against the Bengals, 4 against the Steelers, 1 in Week 3 against the Titans, 3 in their Week 4 loss to the Ravens. And then 2, 2, and 3. 17 turnovers in the first 7 games of the year. It doesn't surprise me that turnovers was an issue for Joe Flacco, nor does it surprise me that turnovers ended up being the final nail in the coffin for this Browns season down in Texas, in a situation where they were facing a fast, aggressive defense that can and does stop the run, or at least slow it down in most situations, and make you one-dimensional. As soon as that happened, turnovers popped up. That's my summary point for this game. I do think the Texans will be a tough out in the next round. Stroud is unbelievable. It's almost not even worth talking about at this point. It should be assumed that he's going to get through his reads quickly, number one, and number two, that he's going to find open guys if the pass rush doesn't get there. Having said that, the Browns almost make it easier for someone like him to do so because of their over-reliance on man-free. This is a bad matchup. To me, I would compare it to a mixed martial arts or boxer in the Browns, who, if they don't knock you out in the first or second round, they become softer the longer the game goes on. And the Texans, I thought, kind of proved that with their ability to pull away mid to late second quarter and then land 2 or 3 knockout blows in the third and then early fourth quarter. Appreciate you guys' time. If you're a Texans fan and you check this one out, let me know if you think there's any elements that I missed here. I didn't think that the Texans would be able to run the ball super well, to be honest with you, against this Browns defense, because the Browns defense is so damn physical and so tough. So it certainly doesn't surprise me they only ended up with 76 rushing yards on the day, because they don't use Stroud as a guy to keep it on zone read concepts, number one. Number two, the play action boot stuff that they utilize so much in Bobby Slowick's offense is, first of all, it's very effective. But second of all, Stroud doesn't keep it that much to get outside the edge. It's designed for him to throw the ball, and it works to great effect. I do wonder if they're forced into being a more one-dimensional team in the next round or the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl, if they make it that far, how much stress and pressure C.J. Stroud can handle. Because he looks like a guy that, even if you're one-dimensional, he can still make all the throws. And he looks like a guy that on a night where, if you reverse this a little bit and say that the Texans' run game was totally stopped and shut down by the Browns, he looks like a guy that could have thrown the ball 44 times, not thrown any interceptions, and still completed 68, 70, 72% of his passes. He's just that clean and that quick with his reads, and it's really fun to watch. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other Texans fans would enjoy this reaction video to the team's 45-14 win over the Browns in the Wild Card playoffs, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media so other Texans fans can enjoy it as well.